39 of the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology. Today's meeting is taking place in a hybrid format pursuant to the House Order of January 25th, 2021. The proceedings will be made available via the House of Commons website. So that you are aware, the webcast will always show the person speaking rather than the entirety of the committee. To the members of INDU, please note I'll take a few minutes at the end of the meeting to just go over the schedule from now until the remaining time of the session. To ensure an orderly meeting, I'd like to outline a few rules to follow. Members and witnesses may speak in the official language of their choice. Interpretation services are available for this meeting. You have the choice at the bottom of your screen of either floor, English, or French. Please select your preference now. A reminder that all comments by members and witnesses should be addressed through the chair. Before speaking, please wait until I recognize you by name. And when you are not speaking, please make sure that your microphone is on mute. As is my normal practice, I will hold up a yellow card for when you have 30 seconds left in your intervention, and I will hold up a red card for when your time for questions has expired. Please keep your screen in gallery view so that you can see the cards when I hold them up. Pursuant to Standing Order 1082 and the motion adopted by the committee on November 5th, 2020, the House of Commons Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology is meeting today to continue its study on the economic recovery from COVID-19. I would like to now welcome our witnesses. Aujourd'hui, nous avons Monsieur
Today, we have Mr. Vincent Rousseau, Rector, University of Quebec in Abitibi-Témiscamingue, Ms. Geneviève Aubry, Director of Collectif Territoire, and Mr. Denis Leclerc, President and Chief Executive Officer of Ecotech Quebec.
And Chief Executive Officer of Husky Injection Molding Systems, and Mr. Mark Mills, Senior Fellow of Manhattan Institute. Each witness will present for up to 5 minutes, followed by rounds of questions. With that, we will start our first round of 6 minutes each, and the first round will go to MP Baldinelli. You have the floor.
Isn't it the witness first? Sorry.
Yeah.
I was just going to say, yeah. I just found my unmute button.
I'm jumping in there. My apologies.
I would ask how their day was going.
Thank you very much, MP Baldinelli. We will start with Monsieur Rousson. Vous avez la parole.
Mr. Rousson, you have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you very much, members of this important committee. Members of Parliament, thank you for allowing me to say a few words about the importance of universities to our country's green economic recovery, especially universities outside of major urban centres, such as the University of Quebec in Abitibi-Témiscamingue. We are located in the heart of Quebec's wide open spaces, lakes and forests, which foster creativity and the emergence of talent. UQAT is a key driver in Canada's economic development. Our university has a presence not only in Abitibi-Témiscamingue, but also in the north of Quebec, Nunavut, Haute-Laurentide, Montreal, and the Côte-Nord. Ever since our young university's inception, we have played and continue to play a leading role in bringing knowledge, applied research, and technology transfer to Canadian businesses. With a large research volume, our university's effectiveness in connecting university research to business needs makes it a key player in Canada. By carrying out and expanding our research activities in our niches of excellence, recognized the world over, we clearly help enhance Canada's international ranking. Ranked by Research InfoSource as the second most successful university in Canada in terms of research performance, UQAT has been helping economic sectors such as mining, forestry, and agriculture address the challenges of climate change for nearly 40 years. The various niches of excellence in universities are without a doubt key elements in a green economic recovery. I'm thinking more particularly about the field of mining and the environment. Thanks to a unique approach based on collaboration with industry and government, a team of seasoned researchers and state-of-the-art facilities, UQAT has an international reputation in research and teaching in the field of mining and the environment. The research carried out focuses mainly on the development of environmental solutions linked to the entire life cycle of a mine and allows for changes in practice that are both sustainable and clearly oriented toward protecting the environment and creating jobs. The numerous joint ventures with mining companies and other universities around the world allow UCAT and Canada to develop innovative solutions that meet the real needs of the mining sector, governments, and society. I'm also thinking of our university's forestry niches. Located in the heart of the boreal forest, our university, through its Forest Research Institute, is ideally positioned to host research projects with its huge open-air laboratory and an extensive network of partnerships and alliances with the forestry industry in Quebec and Canada, as well as with international partners. Through our interdisciplinary approach, we help to disseminate knowledge, but also to incorporate new knowledge in cooperation with industry and the multiple users of the land. We provide answers to forestry-related issues, from silviculture planning to primary, secondary, and tertiary wood processing. The approach aims to facilitate forest certification and integrated land management, particularly by partnering with communities. UCAT is the undisputed leader in Quebec, the rest of Canada, and in the world in the development of new practices for the forestry industry. I'm also thinking about our university's agricultural niches. Did you know that by 2050, the world's population will be in the range of 9 billion people? To feed this population, we will need to increase agricultural production by almost 40%. Scientists say that there is not enough arable land around the world to support future food needs. Or rather, that there is enough. However, this arable land is not distributed evenly. Agricultural development is booming in northwestern Quebec and northeastern Ontario, thanks to a good supply of arable land. Quebec and Ontario have carried out several large-scale agriculture projects together, with UCAT playing a key role. Our university's close cooperation with farmers in both provinces helps us develop innovative research programming committed to forward-looking development suited to the current and future climatic needs. Canada has a unique opportunity to support universities and the agricultural sector as we move toward a greener, environmentally friendly economy that will meet the food needs of future generations. The closer relationship between universities and local stakeholders will also guarantee success in this greener economy. Since its inception, and speaking of partnerships, we're thinking of that between the university and First Nations. I will conclude, because I just have a few minutes left, in saying that universities, thanks to their niches of expertise, are crucial for developing knowledge and research and for training individuals. And for Canada, I have three recommendations, if I may, Madam Chair. I'll just wrap up quickly on those. Well, you can do that. When you have questions, you'll be able to add those recommendations at that point in time, because we have many members here to ask questions today. Thank you. I'll share my recommendations with the committee at that time. Thank you. And I now invite Ms. Aubry. You have 5 minutes. I'm sorry. Thank you for welcoming me here today. I'm speaking to you as the director of Collectif Territoire. The Collectif Territoire is a non-profit organization in Abitibi-Témiscamingue whose mandate is to unite the creative genius of the arts, sciences, and industry for the benefit of ecosystems and communities. Since 2018, the collective has been developing a project that has the support and enthusiasm of the community, the Osisko Lake Project, which aims to rehabilitate and enhance a lake located in the heart of the city of Rouyn-Noranda in a creative process involving various sectors as well as the population. Lake Osisko has been damaged by industrial and human activity in recent decades, and it presents various problems, some of which are common to many lakes in the region and the country. Contaminated sediments, high phosphorus levels, invasive aquatic plants, and so on. To preserve the biodiversity and vitality of this ecosystem, it is important to find creative and adapted solutions to promote its recovery. It is therefore through the search for solutions that we are setting up a true territorial innovation laboratory. The Osisko Lake Project is a research and experimentation ground for engineers, scientists, artists, and other inventors who combine their expertise and talent in the pursuit of this noble and inspiring goal. The Osisko Lake project already brings together more than 40 partners, industrial companies, artists, universities, college technology transfer centers, schools, cultural, recreational, environmental, public, and parapublic organizations. Many who united around this project. Why? Because it is a positive, constructive project with multiple and powerful impacts. It's a project in which the partners are satisfied. It is a project of territorial impact. The Osisko, it was chosen among the 100 best projects. This is a technological showcase. Industrial companies, mainly mining companies, are very active in our region, and their expertise is recognized worldwide. Through the project, these companies are promoting and developing their expertise in innovation, rehabilitation, and degraded ecosystems, bioremediation, etc. Many of them are collaborating in this project. In addition to this rich contribution, the Université du Québec also is involved, as Mr. Rousson has just eloquently presented. Researchers from UQAT are involved in the project and bring expertise in biology, mining engineering, ethics, digital creation, etc. The Technological Transfer Center is also involved in the project, particularly in bioremediation. Artists bring creativity, a look, beauty, questioning, and give color to the project. In addition to having a strong core of local and regional partners, the project reaches out and creates partnerships elsewhere in the province, the country, and around the world. The Standing Committee on Industry, Science and Technology wishes to examine how the Government of Canada, in its stimulus package, can support industries in their transition to greener and more sustainable practices and support territorial development and innovation initiatives. Given the magnitude of the environmental, economic, and human challenges exposed by the health and climate crisis, this plan is an opportunity to implement developmental models for the territories that are more in tune with the needs, characteristics, and strengths of the communities. In order to support industries in their transition to greener and more sustainable practices, the Government of Canada must demonstrate its confidence in community-driven territorial development and innovation initiatives. You'll not be surprised to hear me say that a sure way to support these initiatives is to set up a territorial innovation support fund. A support fund for innovation in the territories is a fund that is managed by and for the territories and which evaluates projects according to their capacity to respond adequately and innovatively to the needs of territorial communities. The most promising projects are often those that emerge from the territories and whose development is not hindered by the restrictive criteria of certain government programs. A fund to support innovation in the territories is a fund based on the evaluation of the potential impact of projects according to the needs and characteristics of the territories from which they emerge. A support fund for innovation in the territories is a fund administered independently by a selection committee whose legitimacy is widely recognized by the people of the territory. It is a fund that also provides support for understanding and documenting the impact of projects and for mobilizing the knowledge acquired. It is a fund that promotes the transfer and scaling up of innovations, knowledge, skills developed to benefit other communities and territories. I have long dreamed of such a fund, and I hope that today's forum has allowed me to make you aware that in Canada's efforts to achieve a green recovery, it is essential to give the territories the freedom to choose the projects that have the greatest potential impact and positive spin-offs in their communities. Thank you. Thank you very much, Ms. Aubry. I now invite Mr. Leclerc. You have the floor for 5 minutes. Thank you very much, and good morning, everyone, and thank you very much for the invitation today. I am Denis Leclerc from Ecotech Quebec. We represent the cluster of clean tech in Quebec, and I'm also the president of the board of the Canadian Alliance that is the umbrella group for these kinds of groups in Canada. The COVID-19 pandemic has shaken our societies. It has added to other already profound crises, such as climate change, which also threatens our health and well-being. And an adequate response to these two crises is essential. For more than a year now, here and elsewhere, a consensus has been emerging within civil society, the private sector and public authorities on the need for a green recovery. The scale of spending required to jumpstart the economy does present us with an unprecedented opportunity to positively transform our societies. That's why stimulus packages will need to make room for projects that will jumpstart the economy and make it more resilient, while contributing to a more effective fight against climate change. And I draw your attention to the World Bank, which said that the most promising recovery projects will be those that integrate 1, short-term benefits for recovery and job creation, 2, the medium-term benefits on growth, and 3, the long-term viability and contribution to sustainable growth and decarbonization, including better integration of low-carbon technologies or strategies. We believe that clean technologies must be at the heart of the recovery. These innovations are essential to sustainable growth and the well-being of Canadians. They make it possible to do better with little. There are several challenges remaining, of course, including we're talking about funding, but we can also talk about access to markets, whether it's here in Canada or internationally. We need to attract investments directly. So these are challenges, but it is by encouraging the deployment of clean technologies and their adoption that we will be able to collectively seize the opportunities of the current context and thus build a greener, more innovative, more resilient economy in the wake of the pandemic. These innovations will improve the competitiveness of Canadian businesses, create jobs for innovative companies, and address Canada's climate and environmental priorities. Our combined efforts will make this recovery a springboard for a positive transformation of our economy to a greener and more prosperous one. And I look forward to answering your questions. Thank you very much for your attention. Thank you very much.
I invite Mr. Galt to present for up to 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you very much, everyone, for giving me the opportunity to talk at this very important point. I'll have a slightly different approach than the people that preceded me. I work for Husky. We ultimately convert raw materials into finished goods, and I've been spending now almost 37 years of my life around the world helping customers make things like medical syringes, IV connectors, bottles, food containers, and things of that nature. The majority of what goes through our products are plastic, although we do process other materials. When I think about Canada's economic recovery, I start first with the plastics industry, and I think incentivizing investment in Canada's plastics industry is crucial. Responsibly managed, plastics have a lower environmental footprint than any of the alternatives. On top of that, fully 73% of all medical consumables used in the world, and that number is growing, are made out of plastic. It employs 370,000 people across the country. It represents $35 billion of GDP, and it is led by small and medium-sized organizations, which, as we know, are at the core of the economy and an essential group when we think about engaging them to build out the business. The second element for me is the importance of the free economy. And what I mean by that is that small business is already very fragile. The actions over the last year and a half have really put a tremendous toll on a lot of small businesses. 99.8% of all Canadian businesses are small and medium sized. Those entrepreneurs are the key to unlocking prosperity for the country. They have been historically, and engaging that group. And engaging that group and thinking about how to do it is very substantial. And that's why when it comes to plastic, I'm a strong advocate of the circular economy. I've seen it around the world. Just last week, I was in one of the largest recyclers on the West Coast. We're involved directly in processing a multitude of materials. And that's the solution for Canada's economy and to grow industry and small business even further. The third thing, which has already been mentioned, but of course it's crucial, is this concept of getting this pandemic behind us and getting Canadians access to the vaccines and the freedom that they deserve, because nothing has been more devastating to the economy than the lockdowns and what we've all experienced. And I think we realized that we could have done a whole lot better job with managing the pandemic and the vaccines relative to our neighbors in the South, where 60% of those wishing vaccines already have both doses, where they're now incentivizing the remaining groups of people, where the economies are opening up, where there's been an unprecedented economic boom. And in each of the 6 customers I visited in the US, all are struggling to find enough people to keep up with the incredible demands in their business. And so opening the free economy, getting the vaccines, nothing could be more crucial. The last comment I'd like to offer the committee is really about how we go about this issue. I have really been harmed, I guess, emotionally, being a Canadian, about the concept of essential and non-essential citizens. I don't like that term. Canada to me always meant that everyone was created equal, the right to speak, the right to pursue the purposes. My neighbors who work in businesses that are deemed non-essential, I consider essential Canadians. And any type of recommendation that comes out of this that continues to designate people as essential or non-essential, in my opinion, is un-Canadian. I mean, look at some of the impact of those smaller businesses, the people that I work with, my neighbors. In Toronto, for example, 306 days lost since the pandemic started when it comes to restaurants. Gyms, 299 days. Hair and nail salons, 277 days. Retail, small retail, 161 days. The closures have put 2 million jobs at risk across the country. Almost 500,000 working moms have lost their job through the pandemic, and as of January had not got those jobs back. We look at the restaurant industry in Canada, the impact is staggering. 10,000 restaurants closed, 320,000 jobs lost, 6 out of 10, which are women. 50% of those businesses are run by new Canadians, and the industry is the #1 source of first job for young Canadians. You can see that the impact across all of these segments has been devastating, and being assigned a non-essential status doesn't make sense to me. I've asked every level of government, where's the scientific evidence to suggest that funneling every person through a smaller number of larger establishments, when each have the same hygiene standards, is riskier than allowing small business to perform appropriately, to maintain the ability to be open, to ensure their livelihoods are secure, but to maintain the security of people in the process. And I haven't got any answers there. So that's probably the most significant part to me. We need to build. We can take the industries and grow them. And I think working with small business and greening them is the right solution. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I will now turn to Mr. Mills. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Good morning. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before this committee. I'm a senior fellow at the Manhattan Institute, where I focus on science, technology, and energy issues. I'm also a faculty fellow at the McCormick School of Engineering at Northwestern University in Chicago, and I'm a physics graduate more than a few years ago at Queen's University in Kingston, Ontario. And for the record, I'm a strategic partner in a venture fund focused on energy tech software. As this committee knows, the world is now recovering from the ravages of the global COVID-19 pandemic. That recovery inevitably means that as activities return to normal, energy use is rising again. And as a baseline, it's relevant to note that over 80% of the world's energy comes from hydrocarbons, that's oil, gas, and coal. And internal combustion engines account for 99% of all global transportation miles. Meanwhile, the wind solar machines, the 2 sources of energy favored in many policy proposals, supply less than 3% of global energy. And as of now, electric cars supply under 0.5% of global road miles. Given the scale of global economies, changing this status quo presents some of the most daunting economic, environmental, and geopolitical challenges the world has ever faced. So permit me to note 3 basic realities, each with implications for considering technologies and policies for altering how the world and Canada obtains its energy. These are realities that help explain why global carbon dioxide emissions continued to increase prior to the pandemic lockdowns, despite massive investments in non-hydrocarbon energy production in both Europe and North America. First, it's indisputable, and it's a good thing, that the world will use more wind and solar machines and more electric cars in the future. The reason for that, aside from policies that encourage all three, is anchored in the fact that those technologies are far better now than they were a decade or two ago. And given the magnitude of future global energy needs, more options are always better. Second, it should be equally obvious that all energy machines are necessarily built from materials that must be first extracted from the earth. Replacing hydrocarbons with wind, solar, and battery-powered machines constitutes a major shift in both the nature and the quantities of energy materials needed for society. It's a switch from using mainly liquids and gases to using mainly solids, and it's a switch that on average results in a 10-fold increase in the physical quantities of materials mined and extracted and processed per unit of energy service delivered to society. Third point is Canada and the United States combined are today and will be for the foreseeable future net importers of wind, solar, and battery machines, or the key components for making them, as well as for most of the critical energy minerals that are used in the key components. And as the International Energy Agency has recently noted, the realities of the scale of that mean that even the most aggressive forecasts for alternative energy sources see the world continuing for many decades to require roughly as much hydrocarbon energy as is used today. So this kind of realities have implications in the accounting for environmental impacts and for carbon dioxide emissions. They also have economic, geopolitical, and even human rights implications. While the United States and Canada in particular are essentially self-sufficient today in net hydrocarbon use, both countries are net importers of alternative energy materials and machines. This means that replacing hydrocarbons, which supply over 80% of North America's energy, with so-called green energy machines, would replace a large share of the domestic GDP of both countries with imports. And so, given the world as it is, not as we'd wish it, increasing the use of green energy machines results in a de facto export of carbon dioxide emissions and an export and an increase in a change in the character of environmental impacts. That's because mining and processing of energy minerals and the fabrication of energy machines, in particular batteries, is inherently energy intensive. And most of that energy use takes place offshore. Calculating the magnitude of that offshoring is complex. Some analyses, including that of the International Energy Agency only last week, have looked at the impact of processing battery materials or fabricating battery components in China, where a major share, in fact, the dominant share of such industries resides. With China's 60% coal-fired grid, this leads to an even higher carbon dioxide emissions elsewhere and an even greater supply chain environmental impacts. This points to the need for a realistic supply chain analysis, something largely lacking in the accounting of both Canada and the United States. And it means that we should also look at expanding our respective domestic mining and mineral processing industries, something that China has been focused on, by the way, for years. Thank you very much. Merci beaucoup.
Perfect timing. And with that, we will now start our round of questions. And I will go to MP Baldinelli. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for joining us today, and thank you for their testimony. I'm going to begin with Mr. Mills and his presentation. And throughout these hearings, we've heard from other witnesses who have appeared, that Canada stands well positioned, in terms of its natural resources to help move towards this green recovery. And your comments are, but it's going to take some time because, as you mentioned, all nations are making this transition. That sheer volume and the requirements are going to be needed for resources and inputs. I mean, that report that you just mentioned, the role of critical minerals in a clean energy transition, just released by the International Energy Agency, it talked about global energy transition will accelerate demand for key minerals such as lithium, graphite, nickel, and rare earth metals should explode, rising by 4,200%, 2,500%, 1,900%, and 700% respectively by 2040. So how do we get to our targets in time, as you know, we're all pledging to Paris Accords, but as other nations are doing it, and to your point, if the cost of getting that input is going to continue, are those figures attainable?
Well, make sure I'm off mute. I think the short answer is no. The figures actually are not attainable. This is what the IEA report makes clear. And they're really two separate issues that are closely related. The implications of that magnitude of new mineral demand, environmentally, geopolitically, but separately, it's can it be done? And I think the IEA, in very cautious language, made it clear that none of the world's miners, Canada, Australia, China, Bolivia, Chile, none of them are planning, have invested in the magnitude of new mining and mine refining necessary to meet those goals. So what they point out is the obvious, and Canadians know this, Americans know this. The average time globally from finding a new viable ore body to opening a mine is 16 years. Canada, to my last examination, is one of the better nations in environmentally expediting that, but it's about 10 years. So these goals will require, as you recounted from the IEA report, hundreds to thousands of % increase in production of materials within 10 years. And yet it'll take more than 10 years to even open mines to begin to supply these materials. There's a profound disconnect between what's possible and these aspirations. And I think this is a tragic mistake, because it has not only enormous implications for the environment. If countries count on those minerals being available to produce these machines and resources, and they're not, then we actually either don't have the supply, or we're stuck with accelerating the production of oil, gas, and coal on short notice, which ironically is possible, but will cause enormous price spikes, which is damaging to all the world's economies. And it won't reduce carbon dioxide emissions. This is a truly critical disconnect between aspirations and reality that the IEA has pointed out. And again, cautiously, they're not an advocate of oil and gas, as you know. They're in fact the advocate of the so-called Sustainable Development Initiative.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. And quickly, in the time that I have available, I wanted to go back to our first witness, Mr. Rousson. He had mentioned he had 3 recommendations he'd like to present. And if he could, Mr. Rousson, if you could make those recommendations.
Thank you, Mr. Baldinelli. Très rapidement.
Very quickly, increase funding to attract, develop, and retain talent close to home. So the brains, the intellectuals we need. Secondly, invest in research tools and infrastructure from universities in Canada. And the third one is very important, and it connects with everything that people said this morning. Support research technology transfer. So transfer to industries so that they are better accompanied. So Mr. Galt, Ms. Aubry, Mr. Mills, everyone has mentioned it. There's a direct link between what the government should invest to support universities in the transfer of technology to individuals and businesses to create innovation and support the economy.
Thank you. How much time do I have, Madam Chair? Or am I?
1 minute, 12 seconds.
Okay, now quickly to Mr. Galt and your presentation. And the federal government has committed $1 billion over 5 years to attract private sector investment in clean tech projects. And the question is, and we've heard from other witnesses, is how do we ensure that kind of money gets down, to your point, to the small and medium-sized enterprises, which have more difficulties kind of accessing those type of funds that are available from the federal government?
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know that I have a perfect answer. I think the point, however, is that that's exactly what we need to do. First of all, we have to begin with the dialogue. How do I green my business? Do we agree on the same goals at the end, which is to lessen the impact on the economy? Can we turn that entrepreneurially into an opportunity to hire, to engage, to build a larger industry? I mean, those are the things I think at the core of it that people need. What they don't need, I think, is the concepts of regulations. I mean, what I'm facing right now is the whole pushback on plastics. I've been around the world for the last 10 years supplying customers with technology to support the circular economy. Plastics has, melts at 280 degrees, aluminum at 660, glass at 1600. If we talk energy, it has the lowest environmental footprint if it's collected and reused. So what I find myself at times is not having the opportunity in all small businesses to engage. Sorry, time is up.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
You're very welcome, MP Baldinelli. We'll now go to MP Erskine Smith. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thanks very much, Chair. Mr. Mills, just to clarify, so if we're thinking of a recommendation along these lines, the idea would be we would recommend that Canada presumably work in partnership with the United States to ensure sort of an integrated supply chain in relation to the coming, whether it's electric vehicles or and batteries for other devices, that as we see the transition towards a cleaner economy, we are integrating our supply chains to that end. And that includes mining, as you say, but all the way down the supply chain.
I've written many times and advocated both before Canadian organizations and U.S. Congress a better integration of the Canadian and U.S. energy supply chains. This is a magnificent continent with incredible resources. We have the capacity to do environmentally sensible mining and extraction and production of everything, whether it's oil and gas or for production of plastics, or whether it's in the lithium and cobalt nickel domains. But we've really lagged in doing this in the essential metals and minerals. Canada's done better than the United States, candidly, but lately it's been slipping. I think this is a mistake given what the world wants to do.
And I spoke to someone recently as we look to electrify more things. It makes sense to you that we would then model out what that electricity demand is likely to be, and then to say, how are we going to fulfill that electricity demand with clean sources of energy?
Well, I think let's use copper as an easy mineral example. The world's demand for copper under the clean energy plans will go up several 100%. The world's current mining capacity and plans for mines are declining over the next 2 decades. Nobody's planning to expand capacity or spend the money on it yet. So electrification means more copper. You have something like 400% more copper per car if it's electrically powered versus internal combustion engine. So these have really important implications. I think the main point I would make is the failure of 2 counts. Sensible integration of physical resource policies and the refining and processing. And the role of plastics, I want to reinforce my colleague from Husky. It's absolutely right. This vilifying of plastic is silly. It's how you get to the goals for lightweighting things. And the failure to understand the time frames. This is a long process. These, and I hesitate to use the word silly, but I will. These silly goals, 10 years, 15 years, energy transitions of the kind we're talking about do not and have never happened at that velocity globally. They just, in fact, won't happen. I just have to say, in all candor, just not possible. So we just have to be more realistic and more sensible, and we're doing neither, frankly.
And Mr. Gall, I want to give you the opportunity to build on some of your opening remarks. When you look at federal commitments, and we've seen federal commitments since 2016 towards a cleaner transition, we've seen recent, the December, there was an update to the climate plan, and then we see from Budget 2021 further announcements. How would you, I guess, articulate exactly what might be missing and where you think this committee ought to make recommendations to the government going forward?
Okay, well, I'm going to start on plastics again. I could speak more broadly, but in plastics, it really comes down to 3 primary issues. The biggest problem worldwide, solved by Norway, solved by Germany, so I'm using their examples as how it can be done, is to establish and harmonize waste collection systems. What we don't recognize yet is that what we call waste today is resources tomorrow. The steel industry realized it years ago when they moved from the large mill that used ore to the mini mill. There's always going to be a balance of the two, and plastics can be infinitely recycled. I went across the country. We have different recycling standards per province. We have different per municipality. I live 15 minutes away on a farm, and I have different materials. So the first and most critical thing, and anybody who understands the economics of recycling will tell you, bale quality and getting the material back is the best. So harmonizing our collection systems, getting enough of the material is key. The second thing for us is let's mandate certain recycled content standards. The industry is supportive of it. We're building technologies that do it every day. Customers have 100% content already in many parts of the world using our equipment. Why is Canada not pushing more recycled content? And I think the third thing is to incentivize the investment in recycling. I know of 3 plants that were planned for Canada on recycling that were put on hold when the government tabled the toxic designation because their shareholders couldn't invest tens of millions of dollars in Canada, uncertain about whether they would be legislated out of existence. So the 3 most critical things that would reduce our environmental footprint on plastics by about 60%, which is already the superior material on a carbon perspective, would 3 practical things. And that's what I've been a strong advocate for the last months and years.
Thanks very much. Those are all my questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. Notre prochain tour, c'est...
Our next turn will be Mr. Lemire for 6 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. It's an honor for me to speak to the new rector of the University of Quebec in Abitibi-Témiscamingue. We had your predecessor at the committee over the summer, and I'd like to emphasize that Mr. Rousson's appointment has been greeted with a great deal of enthusiasm in the region. My question, you said in your testimony that supporting and investing in regional universities is maximizing our chances for achieving a green recovery. So is the research fund for universities sufficient, or are there improvements that could be made to help us to do an even better job? Thank you very much, Mr. Lemire, for their kind words at the beginning and the question. Indeed, investing in universities, and particularly in regional universities, there's a key issue here because we're on the territory that's close to natural resources, and we have direct and close links to these communities. And it's not because my university is at the second best in Canada in terms of this kind of research performance. It's because we got there because we were able to get the subsidies for this research and that we have such close links with the people on the front line. So it's research and development that small and medium businesses sometimes have difficulty achieving because it's complex. It's difficult to go and find that funding. And so for every dollar invested in research and development with universities, we're able sometimes to double and triple those amounts to make innovation move forward faster. So investing in universities and in research funds and in the performance of universities in terms of training and higher education, the more results you'll see. We have people with essential skills. And for me, you'll tell me that I'm already sold on the idea, but investing in universities will guarantee our collective success as a society. Well, I would like to say that Rouyn-Noranda, where the main campus is of your university, has been rated second in Canada as a best place to do university studies, and you have the resources that you've mentioned. Another thing I wanted to mention is that UQAM is not part of the 15 top universities getting funding from the government in Canada. So it's important to emphasize this context that these universities are independent of all the other ones, and the government has to review this and look at the way in which they distribute funds to various universities rather than just to a network. Thank you. So being second in Canada amongst the big successful Canadian universities in terms of research performance, ranked by Research InfoSource, and you talked about that helping sectors like mining, forestry, agricultural, and climate change over 40 years. So can you talk to us a little bit more about your successes at the university in this regard? Well, yes, I'll be brief, but there are several points that Mr. Mills mentioned that are in common. So it's rare in this world to get mining companies together around a table so that they invest in protecting the environment. So in the last few years, we talked to 6 mining companies in the region that invested more than $30 million in the to change their practices to be more environmentally friendly. And they did this with our university and through our researchers. So these are not current practices in the world, and that's one of the particularities of our university. In terms of forestry, carbon sequestration is very important if you want to ensure the long-term lifespan of forests. And for the Aboriginal or Indigenous communities, it's extremely important as well. So we have to work in that way. And I'll wrap up with agriculture quickly. Once again, carbon sequestration is important. We need to increase our capacity of agricultural production by 40%. And organic production will be an extremely important factor as well. We'll be able to produce more per hectare than with traditional methods. So it's the work of university researchers with people in those sectors that allow us to think of a better future in terms of a greener economy for Canada. Thank you. And as the member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue, I can speak about the efforts made by people at your university and the Indigenous people in the area to face common challenges. And so what for you what is the scope of this exemplary partnership that you have, and how can that contribute to a greener recovery or economy? Well, in UQAT, we want to work with and for our Indigenous and First Nations partners, and it's that recognition of the equality of status and of cultures. It's a partnership that's based on respect, and that is how we make contributions to Quebec, to Canada, and even internationally. There are many universities in other countries that come and see what our winning practices are in this regard. But for me, that is a key to the success of the Canadian economy, and that will be to include Indigenous peoples in our efforts to do this. I sincerely thank you, Mr. Rousson, for your testimony. Thank you, Mr. Lemire.
Round goes to MP Massé. You have the floor for 6 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to our witnesses. I'm going to ask Mr. Rousson a question, but after he's finished, I'd invite any other of our witnesses to chime in as well, too. And Mr. Rousson, it's kind of to carry on with our recent agreement, the Canada-US-Mexico agreement, included labor and environmental measures as practices. It's interesting because originally the first deal didn't have that. And it was good that that was, in my opinion, that it was scrapped and that the Democrats included this change, because coming from my sector where it's auto, tool and die, mold making and so forth, we've consistently been undermined by labor and environmental subsidization in terms of competition. Now, this brings us into a first ever agreement where we have it within the agreement, and then there's measurables. Now, mind you, they're pretty complicated at some points, but at any rate, but they're there at least to start. So I'd like your opinion about our trade, and our trade including some type of measurables within the agreement for environmental and labor standards. And once you're completed, Mr. Rousson, I'd invite any other guest to give me your reflection on that. Thank you very much, Mr. Rousson.
Merci beaucoup, Monsieur Massé, pour votre...
Thank you very much for your excellent question, Mr. Massé. In fact, our relationship with our American trade partners is an old one, and we have to work hard on it from an environmental perspective. The Democratic Party in the United States has come with a new vision and a greener vision, perhaps, but at the same time, they're trying to centralize, much like the Republican Party has in the last few years, this Buy American Act, and they're working a lot on that. So the mobility of labor and planning to allow us to achieve our objectives will not be simple. There's a challenge for the university sector to really, of course, make sure that they align the needs of industry and our people in light of the new trade realities that we're going to see between the three countries, Canada, U.S., and Mexico. One key component, I think, that we have to bear in mind in this planning is the whole issue of ongoing education. It's not because you graduate with a diploma from a university or a college that you stop learning or should stop learning. That's why it's so important to carry on with this. And Canada could take different measures for businesses to allow their employees to have access at continuing education throughout their active lives. And that's a component that's really been set aside, and it would help us to work on that aspect that you talked about in terms of labor.
Witness like to offer some comments on that? Mr. Galt, I see your hand. Please go ahead. Thank you. Especially the tool and die mold maker. I know you're just up the highway from me, and so please go ahead.
Well, thank you very much. I think, when we look at the challenge of getting the right people and ensuring the skills bridge in Canada, because this is critical. The world is moving quickly. The requirement for technology is there, and digitalization is having a role in everything we do. And so about 5 years ago, just to talk about this talent issue and the development of the right kind of talent, and importantly, the transition of talent to the new base of skills, we invested in industrial digitalization, Industry 4.0, as you might know it in Europe. We were actually honored in Luxembourg, one of the seats of the European Union for Industry 4.0, as an absolute leader in this field, because we have facilities there also. What we've recognized as the nature of the type of jobs Canadians want to seek is changing. After the Second World War, the European immigrants work with their hands. They were tradespeople. So we had lots of tool and die makers. Today, there are a few people that want to make a career out of that. There's some that do, and they are invaluable, but less people want to be part of that. Most people want to develop digitally. And so what we recognized is rather than actually working the machine tool, building automation, robotics, algorithms to operate machines intelligently is where people get really inspired. We're fortunate in Canada to have a lot of new universities, and so that's great for people coming out of university. But we also have a lot of mature people in the workforce who aren't as comfortable with digitalization. And one of the biggest efforts we have is what we call the skills bridge. What talents do I have today? What talents do I need to accommodate and work within the digital environment? And what's been mentioned here, this idea of assisting Canadians with the education required to make them more relevant inside of a digital environment, to me, is absolutely crucial, both for the performance of Canadian businesses and to ensure the employment of Canadians.
Thank you, Mr. Galt. Any other? I'm not sure how much time I have, Madam Chair. Just a minute. Then just real quickly to Mr. Galt again, I'm just curious on a side issue. Are you having difficulty right now getting any of your salespeople or service people across the border for contracts that you have back and forth? I'm just wondering about that. We're having a real difficult time down here. And again, you're not too far from me. I'm just wondering if that's a problem for you as well.
Absolutely, we are. I mean, 97% of everything we produce has been exported. So our customers are all around the world. Our customers, you can support in some ways, but in other ways, you need to be there. And it's been enormously difficult for us to get people across the border to provide the necessary services to keep the production of things like these IV connectors going, and at the same time to get them back across the border, 2-week quarantine before they can go back again. And I can tell you after 3 or 4 times, many of our service people are saying, I can't do this anymore. There's too much time away from my family. So we really need to find a way to ensure that those are necessary, have a seamless and easy way to make it happen, because Canada is an export country. Yeah. And if we can't perform and support our customers, we're in trouble.
Thank you, Mr. Galt. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We'll now start our second round of questions, and our first round goes to Député Généreux. Vous avez 5 minutes.
Mr. Généreux, you have 5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to all the witnesses. It's really interesting this morning. I'd like to give a bit of time to Mr. Leclerc and Madame Aubry, but in the meantime, I'd like to ask a question of Mr. Mills.
Created, nothing gets lost. Vous avez parlé tout à l'heure du transfert ou de...
You talked about transfers and exportation of our greenhouse gases. And if we want to create in a time frame that I consider also to be completely unrealistic, a fleet of electric vehicles, for example, it takes 10 years in Quebec to launch a new mine. So obviously, if we want to create or set up new mines or export, to try and find the materials to make these batteries in question, which unfortunately are built now in China, and then we bring them back here to make electric vehicles. It's just something unrealistic. So how do you see that export? We all live on the same planet, so how much time do you think that transition that we're hoping to make someday
Well, the short answer is the transition will take many decades to effect, given the magnitude of the materials involved just in the electric car supply chain, never mind the other green machines, just the electric car side. Any serious analysis sees this as taking many, many decades, not one, not two. And given the state of the world today, what we know now about where these minerals are produced, most cobalt's in the Democratic Republic of Congo. 90% of all cobalt refining in the world is in China on a grid that's 60% coal-fired. Majority of the world's neodymium is refined in China on a coal-fired grid. If you do the accounting properly, we have to be honest, we don't really know what the emissions are upstream in many cases because the mines and countries don't cooperate and not required to tell how they do their processes. For those estimates, and there are estimates, you can reasonably conclude that there's no net change. In fact, in some cases, even an increase in global CO2 emissions associated with the nature of the processes we have today to replace an internal combustion engine with a battery-powered vehicle. It's just, again, this is not a policy or statement or a political desire one way or the other. It's just the physical facts of the processes that exist.
Yeah, all right. Okay, merci beaucoup. Thank you very much. Madame Aubry.
Ms. Aubry, I found your idea interesting of having a fund for regional initiatives. I'm in the regions as well, and Mr. Lemire, I think, believes the same thing because I'm hearing the same voices in my ear. But I love Abitibi-Témiscamingue, but I've only been once in my life. But I think it's extraordinary what you're doing there, particularly in connection with industry. Because in my town, we are a teaching town and we have a cégep, but there's a direct connection with industries like Bombardier and now Ashton. So you talked about this fund in terms of the projects being chosen by the people in the region, and that's music to my ears. And Mr. Leclerc, I'd like you to speak to that point as well, because I think Ricotec is in Quebec also. Thank you, Mr. Généreux. Well, you know, over the 2 years that we've been working on our lake project, we've attracted a lot of partners. But one of the problems we have is that on the one hand, we're often being asked in the criteria to take very innovative approaches that will have a big impact. But on the other hand, the criteria are sometimes sort of wall to wall, and they kind of reduce our vision and our ambitions. So it doesn't correspond to our realities in the end. And also, the projects are assessed in a somewhat wall-to-wall way, if I can put it that way. So who better than the people on the ground in those communities? I'm talking about a very legitimate committee, because we don't just need representatives on a selection committee. We need a committee that is appointed by people, and it recognizes whose legitimacy and transparency is recognized. And I think that would make a huge difference. Thank you very much. Mr. Leclerc, very quickly, in terms of regions specifically. Well, when we talk about criteria, we have to look at this differently and talk about the desired outcomes rather than criteria. And that's where we find innovation, because it allows people to achieve a very clear objective without the criteria. And then, now don't look at the clock, please, Madam Chair. Thank you very much, Mr. Généreux.
The MP Amos.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you to our witnesses. C'est fort apprécié.
It's highly appreciated that you're here today. This is a very relevant discussion that we're having. The direction of the Canadian economy, the ways in which we'll be able to achieve net zero. And of course, it's a conversation that involves the role of the state, but also of the private sector in this discussion here today. It's such an interesting discussion that we're having. We're talking about research and the post-secondary sector. I'd like to begin on that point by asking our representative from the University of Quebec in Abitibi-Témiscamingue. The nature of investments coming from the federal government since 2015, according to the information that I have, the Engineering Research Council and Natural Sciences is talking about investments of some $15 million to UQAT in natural sciences and engineering. And we're very aware of the fact that this government's investments, particularly since the 2018 budget, are investments in our most, or the most significant in research in the history of Canada. So could Mr. Rousson speak to the nature of those investments and how they've been used, and perhaps also talk about investments made from the Innovation Foundation, another very important player in investments, and I know that you've benefited from that investment as well. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Amos. Excellent question. And I really must thank and salute the Government of Canada for their investment in the research sector. You also mentioned the Innovation Council, which has allowed us to tool ourselves and have state-of-the-art technology to use. So there have been significant investments in my university and other universities in the regions of Quebec and elsewhere in Canada as well. And that's where it's important not to stop. There's a momentum that's being established, and teams are more and more successful and perform well. And so this has begun to really take off. So the people from industries come and see what's happening in the universities, and now the wheel turns better and better as we continue to invest and continue those partnerships. So as soon as the Government of Canada slows down its investment in these granting agencies, whether it's social sciences or engineering and natural sciences, it's important to invest on all sides here, because inventions are not just technical, they're human and social as well, and that's where it's important to continue investing. So we're investing in human beings who are helping us to develop in other areas. So yes, we have been given some funds, and it's given out pro rata, so we've been able to establish 4 new chairs and increase our intensity on research, and so there's extraordinary momentum right now in the universities in Canada. Thank you, Mr. Rousseau. And I'm very pleased to hear that confirmation that the Government of Canada is investing very significantly in UQAT, and that has resulted in a very significant collaboration through the private sector, civil society, and researchers to bring us to a cleaner economy. And I think that a lot of those investments are bringing us exactly in that direction, to a cleaner economy.
I'll turn this to all witnesses, starting with Mr. Leclerc and Mr. Galt. The recent budget in 2021, I'll be quick. The recent budget brought about massive investments in the Net Zero Accelerator Fund. We're talking $8 billion in funding that will enable greenhouse gas emission reductions across many industrial sectors. Mr. Galt, could you comment on the pertinence of such investments?
Not really that useful for us. When you think about Husky, when you think about the small and medium-sized enterprises across Canada involved in the plastics industry, the toxic designation and the failure to focus on recovery of the materials has more to do with the economic stress we're feeling right now, rather than seeing this current point in time as an opportunity.
Thank you. Unfortunately, MP Amos, that's all your time. We'll now go to Député Lemire. Vous avez 2 minutes.
Mr. Lemire, you have 2.5 minutes. Thank you, Madam Chair. The member from Pontiac, I should tell him that covering a territory like mine, which is near Mont-Laurier, That's part of the University of Quebec in Abitibi-Témiscamingue. So they are neighbors. So Ms. Aubry, the city of Rouyn-Noranda will soon celebrate its 100th anniversary. So it's not nearly as old as Montreal, but it's an anniversary to celebrate, and you'll probably be playing a role in that. So what are the ins and outs of your collective group, and what impact can you have on the territory? Well, our group plays a role, what we call a role of intermediation. So in the world of innovation, it's very important when we rely on a systemic innovation, when we look at the talents and expertise necessary for innovation don't exist within a single entity. And that makes the players who participate even more important to play a role in this ecosystem. So they bring the key players together, and it really is an effort to open new frontiers, and it brings added value to what Mr. Rousson was talking about, the importance of the transfer between industry and the universities. So we create these links between applied research and basic research, and developing also the culture of science by bringing school-age children in and promoting the participation of artists and people from the cultural world, learning and communication. And so really all of this contributes to a vision that is holistic, and that also means that we're not talking about radical changes, but just taking what exists and allow us to mix it up in a new way, and to envision a green and sustainable economy. Well, Patrick Martel at TechnoSub is somebody who's always thinking about new technologies, new innovations in the world. Is that useful to you? We know that the objective is, and I know Lac Cisco is a unique project, but can you use that elsewhere? Well, yes. The person you mentioned is dealing with people in Holland and who are developing. Oh, I'm sorry, my time's up, but thank you very much.
Go to MP Massey. You have the floor for 2.5 minutes.
Yeah, I'll let Ms. Aubry continue and finish her statement there. Please go ahead and finish your statement.
Merci beaucoup.
Thank you very much. We are in contact with researchers around the world who are in touch with us, in fact, because of Mr. Martel's vast network. And Technoscience and TechnoSub is a business in the region. Just received the Prestige label from Solar Impulse for innovation. It's called Mud Wizard, and it allows us to separate water from mud, and it uses potatoes. So there you go. Innovation is everywhere. Thank you.
You seem particularly excited about that, and if it's potatoes, I know that my friend Wayne Easter, who's not on this committee here today, would be particularly fond of that. Is this how long has this technology been in development? Yeah, I'm just curious by that. That's very clever. And just how long has this been in works?
Je sais pas.
I don't know everything about it, but I would say I think a couple of years, and it's already been deployed around the world. And TechnoSub really has that knack of selling solutions, not just products. So the Mud Wizard is supported, and TechnoSub really has as a mission to empowering its business partners and helping them to go further. And this Mud Wizard technology, I invite you to check it out. There are videos on the internet, and you'll understand very well how it works. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. That's all my questions. Thank you to the witnesses.
Okay. We will now go to MP Dreeshen. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair, and it's certainly great to have this discussion this morning. And finally we have some discussions about the realities of the future of renewable energy with the reality of the energies that is going to have to come from the non-renewable resources, and I think that's really so important. And we've talked about 10 years to develop mines here in Canada.
That would be if we didn't have any environmental groups that would be fighting against having that. So I think that's something that we need to consider. But I'd like to speak to Mr. Mills. We've talked about a net zero journey. So when you calculate the full life cycle analysis of global CO2 emissions, what is the opportunity for us to think that it would be realistic timeline to hit that in the year 2050?
Well, I think the question of realism is you put a calculation as and an estimate as opposed to what we know could happen. And I would again refer to the just released 280-page report from the International Energy Agency, which is the preeminent source of information for world governments on this particular issue. And what you'll find is that they cast a doubt on the calculation showing it's possible given what's going on. In fact, they clearly point out, like, given the world as it is, that is how we actually access minerals, how we process them, where they're processed, that you can't get there. They're not saying it's physically impossible in the pantheon of science and engineering. It's just not possible given what we now know, what we're now doing. And they give many specific examples. And in fact, I would recommend the staff or committee look at one particular graph they have summarizing data about electric vehicles, that under ideal circumstances, electric vehicles on average cut CO2 emissions, counting the mining and processing, on average. But the range ranges from is something like a 50 to 70% reduction, not zero, right? This is a big reduction, 70%, up to a slight increase. The range can involve an increase in CO2 emissions from using electric vehicles. The fastest way to reduce CO2 emissions, which no one is proposing anywhere in the world, to my knowledge, is subsidizing more efficient internal combustion engines. We have that's just the economic and engineering reality.
On the situation when we talk about electric vehicles, if we did have this great influx of them, the only idea that I'm familiar with is you'd have to have some massive battery storage projects in order to make that happen, because the electrical grid as we have it would not be able to manage it. So then we'd be downloading all of this into municipalities in an attempt to be able to supply what they need. I'm a former math and physics teacher, so perhaps with your physics background, you could explain somewhat to folks just how easy that would be.
Well, I as a former physicist, but I used to practice as a one. I tell people this is really arithmetic, not in fact physics. We can look at the energy storage capacity of the batteries that are being planned and proposed for the world, or Canada or the United States, and compare it to the amount of electricity consumed in any given year or any given hour. And what you'll find is that even these incredible increases that are being proposed will store minutes, not hours or days, but minutes worth of electric supply. So there's actually no possibility, given current plans, to operate electric grids on episodic power using batteries. The only feasible means will be to do what Germany did, which is effectively built two grids, which costs more than twice as much. One grid is wind and solar with some batteries, and then the shadow grid is about 80% of the original hydrocarbon grid, which is there to provide electricity when the sun and wind obviously don't. It's an extraordinarily expensive solution, but it can be done, but it doesn't eliminate carbon dioxide emissions. It just increases mining around the world.
And I think that's the point. And I would wonder, I know that you've done a YouTube presentation that talks about this. If you wish to and wanted to give the clerk that information, I certainly think that a lot of us could learn from that. So I leave that with you, and I thank you very much, Madam Chair.
Thank you so much. With that, we will now go to MP Johari for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses. It was quite informative. I'm going to start with Mr. Mills. Mr. Mills, you spend a lot of time in your testimony talking about electric cars, wind and solar, and also the energy material. extraction, processing, fabrication, and the integrate supply chain. I like to talk about another dimension of what I believe is our government strategy around net zero, and that's has to do with the hydrogen strategy. And I like to get your feedback into what your thoughts are and the plan that we are using or we are introducing starting 2021, end of 2021, as it relates to hydrogen strategy. What are your thoughts on this strategy and the role that it can play on the green economic recovery?
That's a very good point. The use of hydrogen is in many respects far more significant than the use of lithium batteries as an energy storage mechanism. I mean, I think it's important, I'm sure you know this, that hydrogen is largely unavailable on planet Earth. It left a long time ago. So we have to produce hydrogen the way we produce electricity. You have to use energy to store it in an intermediate form. Electricity is inherently a clean way to use energy, but we have to use energy to make it. Hydrogen's similar. I would say, again, when you look at the physical resource and economic requirements, the same conclusion one reaches, that given the chemistry we have and the energetics that we know how to make hydrogen at scales that a country needs, it will take a very long time to have a significant impact with hydrogen, but it will be more significant faster than batteries. A fuel cell hydrogen is also very expensive, like lithium batteries, but far more effective. But there are no means known to produce at scale at prices that society is currently willing to pay for energy. It's a very expensive path with many technical problems. Hydrogen is hard to store. It embrittles steel. When you put it and store it, it requires much more rigorous safety procedures than you have with natural gas. And roughly 99% of the world's hydrogen today is, as you know, produced from a process called reforming natural gas. So it's basically a way to more cleanly use natural gas, but it's roughly twice as expensive as using the natural gas to make electricity.
Okay, thank you. And I'm going to go to Mr. Galt. Mr. Galt, in your release sustainability plan, you mentioned that sustainability is a top priority for Husky. You also mentioned that your plastic packaging and other end products meet specific regional design requirement and takes high regards to recycling and recycle content in the packaging itself. I understand you talked about the waste collection strategy. You also talked about the recycling standards. You talked about some of the other jurisdictions who are doing this, and you also talk about providing incentive for recycling. But what I want to specifically get your input is around the recyclability of some of these plastics. What are your thoughts on that one, sir?
Certainly. First of all, almost all plastics are recyclable indefinitely. Right? They're hydrocarbons. They're molecules. If you look at PET, the one that's familiar in this container, for example, it's made out of 4 primary molecules. It's the same 4 molecules that made up by weight 96% of the human body. So that's fundamentally what we're working with. In terms of the material itself, there's 4 types of technologies currently available for the purposes of recycling. The first and most widely used is mechanical recycling, where you chop it up, you wash it, you put it through an elevated temperature and a vacuum to remove volatiles, and reprocess and sanitize it. That's in use in Canada today. About an hour away from Husky's facility here in Southern Ontario, there's been a company that's been producing these containers for 10 years from 100% recycled material. So that's mechanical recycling. The second is what we call chemical recycling. Chemical recycling is where you actually breaks the plastic back down into its basic materials and then reconstitute it. This container right here is made from 25% chemically recycled material. It's the first time in the world. So what's attractive about this technology is not only can it be used bottle to bottle, but I can mix clamshells in with it, I can melt films in it, I can mix all kinds of materials. So I guess what I want to say is, we're in these, I have these because these are samples we're providing. Even to simplify it, if you want me to use it, what you might have noticed is there's no label because we're now laser imprinting marking on top of the containers to make them easier to recyclable. Most caps are made from a different type of plastic. This is the new invention we came up with to make the cap out of the same material as the bottle. So what I'm saying is they're infinitely recyclable, and there's a family of technologies we and others are bringing together to make it even more easy and economic to do so.
Thank you, and thank you, Madam.
Thank you so much. I didn't want to cut you off because it's actually quite very interesting. Thank you so much, Mr. Galt. With
Sorry.
that, we'll start our, no, don't apologize. With that, we'll start our third round of questions, and the first round goes to MP Polyev. You have the floor for 5 minutes. I don't see him on camera. MP Polyev? If not, I will, what we'll do is we'll just go to the next person, then I'll go back to MP Polyev. MP Lambropoulos, you have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I'd like to thank all of our witnesses for being here with us today. On remercie tous les témoins d'être avec nous aujourd'hui.
I thank all the witnesses for being with us today. My first question will be for Mr. Leclerc. You spoke of the adoption of new clean technologies and innovation with a view to the green economy, and I agree with you. And you talked about clean energy as well, but I'll come back to the second point later. So, Mr. Leclerc, how do you think the federal government can encourage businesses or various sectors of the economy or provide incentives for them to adopt these clean technologies? Thank you very much for the question. So quickly, if we look at things concretely in the budget and we look at the Net Zero Accelerator Fund with the millions of dollars that might be accessed through it, how can we also accelerate development and the deployment of clean technologies that are Canadian? There absolutely has to be a link. There has to be an obligation for the Canadian companies that will receive these funds to look for innovation in Canada. You have to make a link between industrial companies and small and medium-sized innovators. If we only look at big industrials, and if I to play hockey, if I take that analogy, you need a team. So you need these big companies who are seeking innovation, and in Canada, you have hundreds and hundreds of small businesses that have developed new technologies that are looking at how to deploy them within the country here. So that's one example of how Canada, just in its recent budget, could incentivize much more connection between those two sides. Thank you very much. It's interesting. And my second question.
You spoke about clean energy sources, and in other panels, we've heard from witnesses saying that solar and wind energy, and I know that many of my conservative colleagues agree, is very expensive, a lot more expensive than alternatives that we currently use. And I was just wondering, I know that supply and demand obviously has a big role to play here, and over, I guess, the next decade, things would become more affordable. But how can we make it more affordable now, sooner, rather than just waiting for technologies to improve and for the current ones to get old? How can we get there at a quicker pace? Is there any way forward that would make it easier for provinces and for companies to adopt cleaner energy sources?
You're on mute.
Yeah, this question was for Mr. Mills.
My apologies. Let's see. It's a very important question to sort out the policy framework to accelerate whatever technology. It's when one wants less expensive technology. It's always the case that technologies have a learning curve. They get cheaper in time. But the unfortunate thing is that what most governments are doing around the developed world is they're accelerating the deployment of what I would unkindly call yesterday's technologies. By accelerating subsidies and spending on what you can build today, doesn't mean you're investing in the future. You're not providing incentives for innovation. You're providing more money to those who already build what exists. So in order to accelerate the learning curve, it's not a pleasantly easy answer. It doesn't work well through the direct subsidies of building yesterday's machines. You have to think about what innovation and how it works. And this gets to the points that we've heard already in some testimony that what I'll call heavy-handed regulatory approach to instructing jurisdictions of what to build or accelerating what's built today doesn't necessarily take into account how industry really works. So I'm not giving you an easy answer because there is unfortunately not an easy answer. It is, we need a framework that stimulates innovation, rewards innovation to make new and better things. Frequently, the thing that we want to use, let's say profoundly better solar arrays, profoundly better electric vehicles, are not those that exist today. So how do we get those? Well, we want to provide incentives for that kind of risk taking in both private equity, private capital, right? Because a lot of it's private. Avoiding the disincentives to stop that from happening, which is the transfer of great technology out of universities in both Canada and the United States to making new companies. So I wish there was an easy answer. We in policy circles, which I work in as well, we all like an easy answer, sort of like a slogan, but
my apologies. My apologies,
Thank you very
Mr. Mills,
for the good answer.
Thank you so much. And we'll go back to MP Polyev. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Yes, my apologies, Madam Chair. Mr. Mill, I'd like to ask you about the supply chain behind today's so-called green technologies. You pointed out that the mining inputs that are necessary to create solar panels and batteries are largely sourced from countries like China. I'm going to quote the International Energy Agency report you mentioned. The Democratic Republic of Congo and People's Republic of China are responsible for 70% and 60% of global production of cobalt and rare earth elements, respectively, in 2019. The level of concentration is even higher for processing operations, where China has a strong presence across the board. China's share of refining is around 35% of nickel, 50 to 70% for lithium needed for batteries and cobalt, and nearly 90% for the rare earth elements. So by subsidizing the battery-powered vehicle, are we effectively driving more production to China?
Well, the short answer is yes, unavoidably, because we don't have the capacity outside of China for either the mining or, as the IEA pointed out, the refining. 30 years ago, North America, United States and Canada together, produced 80% of the world's rare earth elements. This is a neodymium, praseodymium, dysprosium, these magical sounding minerals that are critical in all kinds of high technology machines, including green energy machines. I would say we sort of chased those businesses out of the North American continent, and China eagerly embraced expanding the mining. It just takes time to, even if tomorrow in Canada, which, as I've said before, is friendlier than the United States to new mines, I think you've already experienced the challenge in both northern Quebec and in neighboring Greenland is what it takes to open a new rare earth mine.
Well, it takes a lot of governmental delay to open any mine in this country. We have some of the most slow and cumbersome processes to even get the government out of the way and let construction begin. But China powers many of its industrial and mining activities with coal-fired electricity. In other words, we increase global emissions of greenhouse gases whenever we drive more production to China. Given that the component parts of electric automobiles come from coal-fire powered mines in China, is it in fact true that electric vehicles are lower emitting than, say, a small Toyota Corolla or Honda Civic when you look at the life cycle of the vehicle, including its original mining and production through to the disposal of the vehicle?
Well, the really honest scientific answer is we don't know. So the slogan that reduces emissions is actually not knowable. But we do know, when you look at points you raised, that it can be the case, depending on the exact source of the minerals, that the EV driven in Canada emits more carbon dioxide to the atmosphere than a very efficient, best-of-class internal combustion engine. And I think that's a serious problem to sort out.
Right, because presumably the reason why we are subsidizing these electric vehicles is that they are supposedly better for the environment. But if the production of the battery technology, if the mining of the minerals that go into the vehicle emits far greater greenhouse gases than are saved by having that vehicle on the road, then it is a counterproductive subsidy. Would you, in a word, agree with that?
Absolutely. It's profoundly counterproductive.
On that point, just yesterday, Elon Musk announced he's no longer accepting payment in Bitcoin. Why? Because Bitcoin is mined using fossil fuel powered electricity. Can you confirm today on his behalf that his automotive company, Tesla, has decided that it will no longer source any raw materials from China that are extracted in mines or manufacturing facilities that are powered by coal-fired electricity?
Well, he didn't make a comparable pledge. He should also pledge to stop using the internet, because the global internet uses twice as much electricity as the country of Japan and is necessarily fueled at the same ratio as the rest of the planet is with hydrocarbons, which is 40% of the internet globally is coal-fired, and 30% is natural gas-fired. So we should stop doing the zooming we're doing right now, because we're consuming hydrocarbons all over the planet.
Well, so I guess.
Thank you very much, Mr. Poilievre.
Can I make one quick concluding remark?
Very quickly.
So yesterday, Mr. Musk said he's no longer going to use Bitcoin. Today, he'll announce that he's not going to import any more Chinese minerals for his automobiles, and tomorrow he'll announce that he's canceling the internet altogether.
Thank you very much, MP Poilievre. We will now go to MP Lemire. Vous avez 2 minutes et demie.
You have 2.5 minutes, MP Lemire. Thank you, Madam Chair. Well, this is a meeting in which we can see the importance of consultation in the territories and in the regions between civil society, creatives in this world, and the impact that this can have on industry. Mr. Rousson, as an institution, we can also see the impact that you can have on economic development of a region. So can you give us other examples of how UCAT's research projects in areas like Abitibi and the Bay James, and also in the north of Quebec, can I think about Mr. Poirier with carbon sequestration in agriculture, and what you talked about in forestry? I'll give the floor to you. Well, thank you, Mr. Lemire. It's an excellent question, because the work that we're doing, not just my university, but all universities, we are in natural environments and we're in direct contact with people. So the flexibility we have in terms of taking actions allow us to go to the heart of problems to find a solution, as Ms. Aubry said. So it's by talking to people on the front lines is how we come up with innovative solutions and can suggest to bigger industrial players what solutions we might have. So in the north, if it's an issue of carbon sequestration, or if it's along the Pontiac River, or what Mr. Généreux said, where he talked about where our universities are working along with other entities. So just an idea of how to do things differently means that we have a completely different impact. And that's where First Nations and the Inuit have brought us to take a completely different approach to looking at the economy. And we've been working very closely with the Cree community for almost 40 years now. And these are very business-oriented people, and they want to develop economically, but while preserving their environment. And I can see that I have to wrap up now. I saw the little card. Oh, it goes so fast. Yes, well, it's the connection between the various universities across the country and the proximity that they have within their environments that results in our producing innovative solutions. And as Madame Aubry said, the Cisco project is a great example of that. It brings together people from very diverse backgrounds. So thank you. I think that you should have better funding for your projects. Thank you very much.
MP Massey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm going to ask Mr. Galt a question about plastics, because I know that he works with them extensively. And I was very proud of the work that we got done. It was a motion that I had in the House of Commons that was passed, and it was actually followed through by the Harper administration in terms of regulation banning microbeads. Those were some of the plastics that were in your toothpaste and your shampoo and so forth. But perhaps you can provide a little commentary about all plastics are not created equal. So I do understand the differences, but perhaps you can kind of delve into that a little bit, because I think what we're looking at is trying to find the balance of the single use and necessary plastics versus some of the plastics that we use for lightening the weight of cars and other types of mechanics of different machines and so forth that can be more useful. Can you put a little insight about that, please, Mr. Galt?
Certainly. I'll do it efficiently to try not to get the red flag or yellow flag here. So
it's okay. You got 2 minutes here. So if you get the flag, you won't be kicked from the game, but you got 2 minutes.
Okay. Well, I mean, the first thing is the broader use of the term plastics. Everybody defines it differently. If we talk about microplastics, and a lot of focus is on microplastics, the number one source of microplastics in the oceans is tire residue. The next two top sources of microplastics in the ocean are fibers, when you wash and your clothes become lighter, fibers, and road markings. So most people lump that all in. And first of all, I think I have to narrow it down to say that there's a lot of man-made materials that find their way into the environment. And that's why I'm such an advocate of better recovery systems that are defined as plastics. If we narrow it down, however, to the ones that we're mostly familiar with, let's say the ones that are in this bottle or this particular package of materials, the most common materials used for packaging have been chosen because first, they're medical grade. They're completely stable molecules. They're completely hygienic. They don't interact with the substance inside. That's why an aluminum can has a plastic liner, every one in the world. Otherwise, there'd be a reaction between the contents and the aluminum. So that's the first reason. The second thing is that there's about 3 grades of plastic that represent most of the things we use: PET, polypropylene, and polyethylenes. I think the thing that a lot of people don't appreciate is that they're very versatile materials. This bottle, this blood tube, they're made out of the same material. The heart stent that goes to correct heart surgery is made out of the same material. So first thing we have to appreciate is there's a family of materials that are highly used, very hygienic, very recyclable. Then secondly, there's a category of what I call hybrid materials. That's where you're mixing 2 types of materials or overusing, let's say, materials. And that's why lightweighting and finding smarter ways to get the performance you need without these composite structures are part of what's a big focus in the industry. So hopefully that helps a little bit.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much. We'll now go to MP Polyev. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Mr. Galt, I'd like to give you the opportunity to tell our committee what essentials of life require plastic.
Well,
I'm leaving it open-ended.
That's a big subject. So I brought a few samples in, which are real projects we're involved in. So 73% of every medical device in the world uses plastic, and that number has been growing by about 2.5% per year. Unbreakable, hygienic, moldable. That's big, and I could bring EpiPens, blood tubes. Last week I was working about new syringes because as a result of the pandemic, we found we have a global shortage of 1 and 3 gram syringes. So we're talking about new releases of technology for syringes that also protect healthcare workers better. Shampoo bottles. This device couldn't be made. We provide technology to help make these devices today. There's not a electronic communication device that wouldn't. Cars, makeup. Containers, obviously the food and beverage we're familiar with, glasses, contact lenses, all of the PPE used today.
So really nothing important, it sounds
nothing
like.
important. Canadian money, I don't know what you think of that.
Well, it's becoming less and less valuable, so maybe that's not the best example.
Hey, but yeah, everything. The chair I'm sitting on, the table I'm working at, the carpet that's on the floor, the manufacturer of the wallpaper, what goes into the wallpaper, and that thermostat on the wall. Yeah, I could go on.
And how easy would it be to just replace all of that plastic with something else?
It would not be possible today.
So presumably all the people whose lives are saved by these medical devices would then be lost. And all of the devices that make our quality of life infinitely more advanced than it was in the past would be gone, and so too would the quality of life on which we depend. Are the kids that are standing at protests demanding a ban on plastic would not be able to organize that protest because their phones would not be possible without plastic. And they wouldn't be able to get to the protest in the first place because of the plastic that's required to make their automobiles. So really, this idea of declaring plastic to be a toxin, what do you think will be the impact on our lives here in Canada if it goes ahead?
It'll drive two important streams of investment out of Canada. I mean, first of all, 370,000 people in Canada rely on it. Are you going to invest in Canada versus a market that is responsive, supportive, and encouraging investment down south of the border? Absolutely, you're going to move south of the border, and that's why many of these large plants have stopped. The second thing is that, as the pandemic proves, Canada is completely dependent upon medical devices from foreign entities. I have the percentages up here. I won't go into it. We don't have a domestic industry for our own supply of these absolutely critical items. Who's going to set up shop here to do that? We build the tooling to do it. We sell the tooling to foreign nations. Those foreign nations import those goods to Canada. Why aren't we building domestic supply chains for these crucial items? I don't get it. So it's just going to drive investment out. It's going to make us more dependent on foreign entities. And we're still going to require these every day. That's not solving the problem.
We'll just buy them from abroad.
Just buy them abroad doesn't solve the problem.
Right, and that's just what we do in oil, right? We've prevented the construction of a nationwide pipeline, so we have to import oil from abroad in eastern Canada. And right now we're in the embarrassing position where we have to ask the governor of Michigan to sell Canadian energy to Canadian consumers because we can't build our own pipeline connecting all of our Canadian provinces. And now we're going to do the same thing in plastics, drive production out of the country. We won't stop using plastic, by the way. We'll just buy it from foreigners who will make all the money and take all the jobs while we pay for it on the credit card. That is currently the direction of our country. Why can't we just reverse that approach and produce and recycle the plastic here in Canada in an environmentally responsible way? You're the expert on this. Can we make that happen?
Absolutely. Canada has the potential with its natural resources, with the recyclability of Canada, with the technology here, to establish itself as a global leader. I mean a global leader in turning waste into resources, into recovering and reprocessing those resources and putting higher valued secondary quality goods back to the Canadian public, creating jobs and safeguarding us in a future pandemic. Without a doubt, we can do that.
And how does plastic rank as a recyclable material? Because when I was a kid growing up, my teachers always told me the best way you can help the environment is to reuse and recycle. Is plastic well ranked as a recyclable material?
I got a red flag. I don't know if I can answer.
Very quickly, Mr. Galt.
It has the lowest environmental footprint, lowest energy content, lowest energy use to recycle of any competitive material.
Thank you very much. We'll now go to MP Assassi. You have the floor for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all the witnesses for appearing before committee today. Now, Mr. Mills, I was wondering if I could pick up where you left off. You were explaining to us the need to stimulate innovation and risk-taking and things of that nature. I was wondering, given that you explained to us how it's important to incentivize risk-taking to spur innovation, I take it you look at it from a comparative context. What jurisdiction or country would you say has done the best job on that particular front?
Let's say traditionally it's been the United States and Canada. This has been the epicenter of new business development, new small business formation has been in North America, not in Europe. In fact, whatever measure you use to look at new companies, new formation of companies, North America has been up until very recently the we'll call it friendliest jurisdiction to be an innovator, an entrepreneur, or a small business. That's become more difficult, certainly in some areas, especially resource extraction. The small privately funded mines are left the United States a long time ago, most of them, and Canada's having the same trouble. But that's been the best jurisdiction. Germany, France, Italy, they've lagged. I mean, this is not a criticism of them as people. It's just the reality of the governance. We don't see, let's go back to BlackBerry, the beginning of the smartphone revolution is traced to Canada, frankly. And then the United States, of course, because Apple did one better. I still like my BlackBerry, by the way, but I don't use one anymore for obvious reasons. But those are good examples, and we hope and expect to have that kind of innovation in physical resource areas like mining and oil and gas. It's a tougher one because they're older industries. This innovation is harder because of the scales involved, but not impossible.
And if you could share with us some concrete measures to incentivize private industry, to incentivize, I believe you mentioned hedge funds, to actually invest in innovative technologies. What would that concrete recommendation be?
Well, let's clarify. I don't say hedge funds, but private equity, which is a different category of private money. Hedge funds have a notorious role because they hedge investments, so to speak, right? It's the most innovation. There's a role for government. Obviously, this is a very old debate, a very important one, especially in modern times. It dates the last 80 years since World War II. We've talked about how governments can play a role, but the essential answer is because of the nature of risk in doing something different than everybody else is doing today. If you want to reward the innovator, you have to give them the latitude to do it, which means they have to find money. It's always still money. And the risk taking is taxed, right? So let's just use a specific example. If you tax risk takers the way you tax non-risk takers, you get fewer risk takers. So it seems unfair to reward the risk taker for the outsized gain in lower taxes. But what you don't see is behind the scenes for every successful company, there are hundreds that fail. As we all know, it's an old truism, but it's a true truism. So if you want more of it, tax less of it, simplistically.
Okay, fair enough. You also touched on rare earth minerals, and you talked about how 30 years ago, North America was essentially leading the way, but things have really changed, both in the US and in Canada in the past several decades. Any specific recommendations on that front, given how critical these minerals are?
Well, it's a pretty easy generic one, but it's a very tough one to implement. Same point. Mine sites, if you assume no regulations, still take a very long time to establish. They're physically demanding piece of engineering. So everything we do to delay that makes it riskier. And so risk capital goes to where it's easier to build the mine faster. What that means today, by and large, is the epicenter of new mine development is Africa, and largely through Chinese investments. We all know why. It's because of the far too light, in my view, environmental regulatory environment. So what we're doing is trading two extremes, essentially no regulations versus too much regulation. And so the mines are opening up where there's no regulation, so to speak.
Thank you, Mr. Mills.
Thank you very much. And that ends our third round. I'm going to thank, first of all, the witnesses for being here today. Excellent testimony. Merci infiniment pour votre témoignage.
Merci. Thank you so much for your testimony. And Mr. Leclerc, go Habs go, but I agree with you.
say goodbye, and I'll ask the members to stick around because I'm going to just go over the next couple of weeks what we have in the cooker to see if we can work out something that we can get everything done before the House rises. So with that, thank you very much to the witnesses for being with us today. If you have anything that you would like to submit, I know Mr. Dreeshen had suggested a YouTube link. If you'd like to submit it to the clerk will then circulate it to the committee members, and we'll be able to watch those videos. And now I feel like I've failed science class and I just got a refresher course. So thank you so much. Merci infiniment.
Thank you so much.
Just let the witnesses leave and we'll go with our plan for the rest of the session. Merci. So thank you all for sticking around. We have a few minutes, and I just wanted to connect because we have a couple of things still outstanding. One of which is we have some witnesses that we have invited to speak on the recovery, COVID recovery meeting, and they weren't able to be with us in the times that we had booked. So we do have some witnesses that would like to appear on the 27th, which is the Thursday when we come back after the riding week. So we will allocate that meeting for those final witnesses for the Green Recovery Study. And as you know, we also have 3 reports that we need to hopefully finalize and table in the House before the House rises. I've been working with the clerk on that, and as we are still in public, obviously we can't talk about what's in those reports, but we're trying to make sure that we can finish the session tabling those reports, but also dealing with the piece of legislation that was referred to our committee yesterday, C-253. So I have a plan, and I think this committee's been pretty good about, collaborating to get us across the finish line. So my suggestion would be, and I'll have the clerk circulate that once we kind of agree to it. So next week is a riding week. The following week on the 25th, we will invite the sponsor of the bill, MP Gill, to come and present for the first hour. So for C-253, we'll go then into camera and look at the affordability and accessibility in telecommunications, because we will be receiving probably by end of this week the second draft of the reports. So it'll give us some time. We can look at it then. And then what we'll do, the 27th, we will have that last meeting on green recovery. What we'll then do is we're going to spend the first hour of each of the remaining meetings dealing with C-253 and the second hour finalizing any reports, because we need to get those reports finished by the 10th so that the analysts can do what they can do to get them back to me so I can table them by the 18th. So in a perfect world, I think we can do this. We can probably get everything done before the House rises for the summer. So again, I don't know how many witnesses people will want for C-253, so I want to give us a little bit of wiggle room, but I think we can actually do this. So I wanted to put that proposal out to the committee members, just so you know also what you have on your record, and get some feedback if you all think this is a good plan. I see some thumbs up. It also gives us a little bit of flexibility in case we need to allocate a little bit more time for a specific report versus another one. So I wanted to just kind of lay that out, and I think we can do this. Monsieur Lemire?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, for that proposal. I think that is consistent with our objectives. So I understand that we can keep some flexibility. And if, let's say, we all agree on a report and it's adopted in 5 minutes, we could move right on to the next report within the same meeting. So I'd like that flexibility. I'd like to ask the analysts, is it possible, in their opinion, for us to have a draft report on aerospace, on Rogers, and obviously on the green recovery?
That I will turn to the our analyst. I don't think it's possible to have it before end of June, but there might be one that might be possible. But I'll turn it over to Monsieur Law.
Merci.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So the reports on the aerospace industry on the Rogers Shaw acquisition and the green recovery, we expect to have ready for your coming back in September. So we're assuming that the committee will not sit during the summer, and so those 4 reports, in fact, will be ready for the fall. Thank you. So I understand that they'll all be ready at the same time. So could we have some flexibility if ever one is ready earlier, that we might be able to get that? Because I can't deny that we could find ourselves in an end of session without having tabled those reports. Even there's the potential of working in the summer, but otherwise, Plan A as proposed suits me. Okay, well, in terms of the ability of tabling another report before the month of September, that depends. First of all, if it's finished before the end of September, our analysts are working madly for us on this, and we greatly appreciate their work. But I don't know if it's going to be possible to have it before September. So, but as we did earlier in the session, as soon as we come back, we can continue our work in September. But if there's a change, I'll certainly be in touch with you.
Comments with the plan? I think we can do this. And what I'll do is I'll have the clerk send it around with a little plan match. And if we're disciplined, I think we can get everything done. Good, perfect. So with that, I want to thank everyone, and MP Baldinelli, thanks for that catch. Just going right to the rounds. A little bit of a news day today, so a little distracted. So thank you everyone for your time today. And with that, I want to thank the analysts, of course, for your great work. Mike, everyone in the room, nos services de traduction, merci beaucoup.
Our interpretation services, thank you very much.
Merci.